Good morning. Welcome to Saturday Morning Coffee. My name is Lance McKinnon. I'm here with my co-host Tiffany Linderman. Good morning, Tiffany. How are you doing?
Hey, Lance, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing absolutely wonderful. Do we have a special guest today?
We absolutely do. I'm so excited. We have Lester Young from Path2Redemption, and I am so thrilled to hear this story. Good morning.
Good morning, Lester.
Blessings, blessings. I have my cup of coffee, not the SMC cup, but I have my personal cup. Good morning.
Well, we'll make sure you get some. Well, thank you for taking time out of your amazing schedule to sit down and tell us your story. This is a very near and dear story. Um, I just want to briefly, I'll let you tell it, but um, as I always say, that we all have a past, we all have a history. And my motto is to look in the windshield and never in the rear view mirror. And because success is the only option. And I'll turn it over to you, Lester.
Hey, thanks, Lance. Thanks, Tiffany, for this invitation to be on this phenomenal podcast, Saturday Morning Coffee. Just wanted to say thank you all for that journey, for this invite, and looking forward to having a fantastic interview with you all today. And hopefully your audience would definitely benefit from this as well. As Lance mentioned, my name is Lester Young. I always say that I am a person who's formerly incarcerated. And what does that mean? That means that I was sentenced to life at the age of 19 years old in South Carolina Department of Correction. I ended up serving a total of 22 years and 5 months in prison for murder. I shot someone actually died as a result of my poor choices over a drug dispute. I started selling the drugs around about 17 years old. After the passing of my mother, I dealt with a lot of pain and a lot of guilt that I did not get the counseling that I look back now at the age of 49. I always said that was a very pivotal moment in my life where I felt like I should have gotten counseling. But unfortunately, in my community, counseling was not something that was talked about or even heard about. So I went to what I knew best in my environment. That's when I embraced the violence in my community by using that as a way to express my pain of the guilt that I lost my mother. And not the crazy thing, but the sad thing about that, and losing of my mother at 16 years old is like one night, me and my mother had a disagreement about something as simple as me washing dishes. And I chose not to wash dishes that night, just being rebellious as a 16-year-old, went to bed upset with my mom, didn't say anything, got up the next morning, didn't say anything to my mom, and walked out of school expecting that when I walk home, me and my mom's would make it right. She'd have some ice cream for me or something like that to make the truce between the both of us like she normally does. But unfortunately, it didn't happen that day. 3 hours after I left that house, my cousin came to tell me that my mother had passed away that morning as we were driving going to school. And that right there, put me in a bad situation from 16 to about 26, 27 years old. I found myself in prison. Even after that, before prison, struggling with guilt, struggling with that burden of felt like my mom's died upset with me. I didn't find an outlet to release it. Unfortunately, it led to a lot of bad choices. And that's just a little bit about me, and look forward to continue to dig deeper in this conversation.
Wow, that's just incredible. I'm almost speechless already. And this is going to be a tough question, but you know, when your mother passed away, I know you think that everyone lives forever in a sense, especially when you're younger. And you know, it makes you think about the times that when you're fighting, or just you're just not in a good space, that you think like, hey, you know, tomorrow, there's always tomorrow. But it's very important to obviously appreciate those that you love. And I know you absolutely loved your mother. I know you did. But I was curious, what ended up happening to your mother that she ended up passing away so suddenly?
Yeah, you're right. Suddenly, thank you for that. My mom, she was sick. She had a pneumonia. We found out she had pneumonia on the lungs, and we did not realize how bad it was. My mom didn't show that sign. She was just a woman that hold it in because she was a caretaker of the family. So she didn't really, we knew she was sick, but we didn't know that she was that sick. But my father, that morning, my father was planning to take her to the hospital just to get her checked out. And then the day, that same morning, he's coming back from work to take her to the hospital. He got the news from my sister, who stayed home with my mom's that morning, didn't go to school that morning, but to stay home, got the news that she had passed away in her sleep and at the house. So that was extremely traumatic for me and everyone else. But for me as a male, a Black male in the community, my father coming from a culture where he did not express his pain, as Black men, and I'm pretty sure it depends upon different cultures, but we as men, we don't show pain, we don't show that. And for a young teenage boy looking at his father who was looking for some answers, my father showed no emotions. And I know it was devastating for him, but the culture in which he was raised, he didn't express that. He didn't show me that. So my immediate response was, I just gravitated to anything in that environment that would allow me to scream the pain that I felt, and like I said, not only losing my mom suddenly, but just the whole process that she died. And I felt like she died upset with me. And that began that trajectory into leading that life of selling drugs and acting out in school, getting kicked out of school. And as I said, unfortunately, being sentenced to life in prison, chose to sell drugs, something I never was raised up in doing. My father never sold drugs, never been to prison. My mom, that's not the culture the type of household I came from, but it was just so much pain. So that's why I tell people today, like, we got to be thinking about counseling. When we see young people hurting, we just can't see the behavior and try to punish the behavior, but we have to go to the root of the problem. Sometimes the root of the problem is the solution, but unfortunately, we're not conditioned to do it that way. We see a problem, like me, I got caught for selling drugs in school. They said that's a problem, send him to jail, and hopefully that rectifies his behavior, but it didn't rectify the behavior. It just reinforced a certain thinking that I had, and I never found a way to release that pain.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good subject, and we were just talking about this with Stefan from Good Brothers. He just put out a really big article about it's really important that we do get therapy for men, and I think I've mentioned it several times. There in the past, there's always been a stigma of not talking about your unloading your suitcase. But if you don't unload your suitcase, you just continuously carry that package on, So I think a lot of people need to benefit from it. And by you saying that you go to therapy, other men go to therapy to help them better themselves, it's really important because it's okay to be a big boy and cry. Real men do cry. There are problems. We are not supermen. I lost my father, my man of wisdom and so forth like that. So I get it. So, but one of the things he always said to me was, you know what, talk to somebody outside the box because they can give you a different perspective and lead you down a different road that you don't want to go. And if you surround yourself with a circle of people who think like you never know. You're not going to get that same advice because they're just going to agree with you. And as we always say, Tiffany and Lester, iron sharpens iron. And, and that's a really important thing in life. And so, but I want to dig into a little bit more deeper about, you mentioned that you did receive a life sentence, but you're here today and we're talking about Path to Redemption. So I want to hear about how you managed and how you maintained and what you're doing now, because what you're doing now is absolutely remarkable.
Thanks, Lance, for that question. The journey of being, no one could understand or even imagine the type of guilt and pain I felt at 19 years old. One, not only about the life sentence, but the poor choices which I made. I took another human being life, right? So now I'm sentenced to prison for murder in someone over drugs, dealing with the guilt of my mother still weighing heavy on me. And then I was placed in a system where, unfortunately, the prison system isn't set up to help a person process their trauma. It only reinforces their trauma because you're basically told, with the life sentence that I had, was like, sit on this shelf and do your time and don't bother us, we don't bother you. That's the mindset of the correctional environment. So here it is, I'm sitting in a prison environment, like internally wrestling with the younger version of me versus this 19-year-old, this 20-year-old, this 22-year-old person that knows that he was not raised this way. I'm literally battling with this person. But I remember one day the prison chaplain, I guess he saw something in me, and I'm glad that he did, but he pulled me to the side one day and he was like, Lester, what is your goal? And I was like, what do you mean? What is my goal? I'm in prison for life, man. It's like, and this was like in the 1990s now, right? We talking about 92, 93, and my projected parole date was 2012. That's like a huge hill to climb, right? And he was like, what is your goal? I said, I don't have a goal. My only goal is to survive in prison. He said, you should think bigger than that. Like you just mentioned, Lance, think outside the box, find someone that think outside the box. And that's what that prison chaplain was for me. He challenged me to think outside the box. Like everybody in prison only doing time to survive. He said, do this time to thrive and find purpose and redemption in your sentence. And he gave me several books, but one of the most profound books that he gave me to read was As a Man Thinketh, So Is He by James Allen. As a Man thinketh, and it was really about how a paradigm is shifting the thinking, the narrative. Change the narrative in your thinking, you change your behavior, right? You change your life. And for the longest, I had on replay this narrative that said I wasn't worthy of nothing, I was uneducated, I was have no self-love, I'm doing time, so I'm just going to allow the environment to be a product of the environment. That was the narrative that circulated in my head for the first 5 years of my incarceration. But when the chaplain gave me this book and we dug deep into this book and I understood the power of transforming my thoughts would transform my behavior that will expand my future vision, that's when things clicked for me. And that's when I began to do the internal work of healing. It was not more so of dressing up in the external, but it's like really healing from my brokenness so that I could heal. And I no longer see the world through broken glasses, but I see the world now through a place of healing. And that's where the journey of Path2Redemption began. So that's when I started doing all of this internal work, healing from the grief of my mother, making amends with my victim. I tell people that one of the most powerful spiritual moments that I had in prison is where I remember praying like for days and weeks, just fasting and praying. And one Friday night, I'll never forget this night, one Friday night after watching a show called Dateline, I was watching this show and it was about a mother who lost her son to murder. And I was watching this show and it triggered in me what I thought my victim experienced and what they were experiencing. For the first time of my incarceration, I started not thinking about me, but really thinking about the people I harmed, right? And the harm that I caused my family, his family. And that's when God placed me in this position where I realized then that I needed to make amends with my victim. And it was not just in a physical sense, it was more so in a spiritual sense. I woke up in the middle of that night, that Friday night, on my knees, begging God to forgive me. And something whispered over me, said, don't ask me to forgive you. I've already forgiven you, but ask the person you have harmed to forgive you. And that was like a blowing moment for me, right? But in that moment, that's when I believe me and Gary, his name is Gary, me and his spirit begin to communicate, where I had an opportunity for the first time in almost 6-7 years to call his name, because for the longest I deflected by not using his name. I gave respect to his name, I spoke to his spirit, and I made amends. And I said, I promise that whatever happens after this, I will do everything I can to honor your life by doing the right thing. I would not live the life that I lived prior to my incarceration. So everything about Path2Redemption is about honoring my victim. His name is Gary, and honoring his family, and then honoring my life, my family life, and then my life.
Wow. I think Lance and I are both speechless right now, but I'm like over here about to cry, and Lance didn't prep me that I needed to bring tissues, and he normally does. But I mean, first off, I'm just so inspired because I feel like this is part of my life that I'm not well in tune to, like that part of life. And I think that what you're talking about, from just like the foundational pieces and helping people to be better, that is so key. I mean, every day, like you said, the self-talk, telling yourself that you are not good, that you are this or that. And, in reality, whether it's true or not true, your self-talk telling you this only puts you that direction. And as soon as you said you're shifting how you're going to think about it and made yourself believe that you are worthy and that you can change the path forward, you turned everything around. And the most beautiful thing, as you just said, about being able to honor Gary, because his life meant something, and now you're helping to hopefully transform people's lives and potentially the systems that are in place today to ensure others can make better choices.
Yeah, Tiffany, I fully agree with you. That's the whole journey right now is how, like, Path to Redemption is not about me and an ego thing. It's about how do I help men and women who are currently in prison find redemption. And you only can find redemption, especially if you have harmed someone, is that I live with a level of guilt of this person in my spirit for months, years, and the prison system didn't show me how to process this. And it's a daunting, it's very painful, torturing situation to be in a prison where you want to find a way to release your remorse for this person, and you can't because there's no system in place. So as I said, I'm so thankful through my faith that God showed me a direction, and he was like, don't keep praying to me, speak this person's name, honor this person, and begin this journey. And from there, it was a healing process for me. And another example of, not another example, but another pivotal moment for me after that event that I had that Friday night is I was watching an Oprah Winfrey show one afternoon, and she spoke about gratitude, 5 things, right? Creating a gratitude journal and writing 5 things down. For the first time, I began this healing process through writing. After I had that spiritual moment with Gary, now the next part of that healing was beginning to write. Why am I grateful? Because in prison, I had all the reasons to be ungrateful and be mad, wake up every morning mad. But on that show that I watched with Oprah, she said, write down 5 things in the morning and at night that you can be grateful for. And from that, I began this process of healing through writing 2 letters to myself, writing letters to my family, writing letters to Gary, writing letters to his family, to his wife, to his children. I have over 30 journals of me processing my healing through writing, because in prison, again, the counselors, there's no real prison counselor that can help you process grief. There's nothing to help you deal with that type of restorative justice component to your crime. It's just like you sit there, do your time, and then you get out of prison and hopefully you make it successful. But God didn't have that plan for me. I'm so thankful that the prison chaplain, his name is Chaplain Scotland, who gave me that book. And then the second book he gave me was Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. And reading that book, it gave me a framework, like life in prison there's a life after prison. It's all about how you invest in you. So it's like, how do you take this setback in your life and turn it into stepping stones to something great? Nelson Mandela showed it. Many individuals who were in prison showed how you can transform your life and go and transform your community, your society, and the nation. And that's where I saw my vision when the chaplain gave me those 2 books. The Long Walk to Freedom gave me an idea that my life does not have to be tied to my past, but I can create a better future by changing my mindset.
That's absolutely amazing because, we know that sometimes that the prison system is a continuous cycle. It's in, it's out, but your story is an amazing story. And that's what really I wanted to be out here because I know that you're going back in to the prison system. And the stigma I think we have as a society in the workforce is like if somebody has gone to prison or gone to jail or anything else like that, they're non-hireable, you know. And that was always one of my biggest hangups too, because coming from a human resources background, I always looked at giving second chances um, because I know that God has given me more than second chances. There's a lot of things I've done in my life that I've never got caught for, and thank God that I wasn't caught. And I'm being honest, and but when somebody came in to look for a new position, trying to get a new start in life, and that was one of the first things they would say to me is like, "Well, I was in jail, I was in prison," um, and I would immediately flip the resume over and say, "Let's just have a conversation and go from there."
Yes, Lance, you're right. Unfortunately, our society is create this fearmonger type thing when it comes down to people in prison, like transitioning out of prison, like fear them when they get out of prison. They're felons, they're ex-cons, they're ex-inmates, they're convicts, they're irredeemable, right? And that's a fear that some people have subconsciously. So when a person like myself apply for a job, they automatically see from the news about this bad boogie person about has a felony conviction, and people push back on that, right? Not realizing, according to studies, statistically, people who have served a certain amount of time in prison and return back into the community and seek employment, they are less likely to reoffend. They have a greater chance at succeeding at life, right? But what we see in our unfortunate society is they magnify one person or two individuals who got out of prison and committed another crime. But the question is never asked, was they hired? What type of connection they have with the community? Most of these individuals were not even hired. So companies now bought into this fear of hiring someone who has a felony conviction. And my pushback is that unfortunately, I mean, according to studies, we have more people succeeding after prison who are employed than not employed. And not only that, but studies have also shown that individuals who have committed a crime in prison and actually working for different organizations and businesses, they are less likely to commit a crime with that organization. You find people who have never been to prison are actually carrying out some of the most craziest crimes, from mass shootings to embezzlement, et cetera, who never had a felony conviction. So we have to understand that individuals with felony conviction don't really oppose a threat to the workforce and the community. The benefit in hiring someone with a felony conviction, you want to like transform our communities. You transform community by employment. I always tell the local officials here in South Carolina is that if you want to like stop a bullet in these communities, these violence in the community, you start giving people jobs, giving them purpose, giving them connection, and you'll start reducing crime. You don't reduce crime by creating more laws to keep them out of the community, out of the workforce. You reduce crime by opening the doors to the workforce and to the community, so that now they have a sense of value. And not only that, but now economics, the changes in the community structure, because you have more money flowing in a legal way in the community versus illegally. So I'm a firm advocate for that, for myself and for the thousands of other individuals who are living with these felony convictions. I believe that we cannot exclude them out of the workforce and out of our churches. You find people have felony conviction, they got a bias about people even coming to church, man. Like, come on, be real. Like, this cannot happen. You can't be, So I don't want to jump on my soapbox any further with that, but I just very passionate about them. The great question, Lance.
You're on a roll. That's what I have to say.
You can jump on your soapbox because, and I'm going to give a shout out to a gentleman called Harry Blakeman out of Ohio. He started a company called Honest Jobs. And when he was young, he was incarcerated. And after he got out of incarceration, he tried to find employment. And he wasn't able to find employment. And now within his organization, he has a staffing organization, and he's nationwide, and he is hiring people that were incarcerated, because that you've changed. We all change. If there's no way I'm the same person at 50 that I was at 20 years old. It just can't be possible. I wouldn't be alive.
Yeah, you're that same person, something's wrong with you, because studies, again, if we into this evidence-based process of growth, right? Studies have shown again that over a course of time, people mature out of crime and criminal behavior, right? If you were an adolescent, you engage in these behaviors, you age out of these particular behaviors. And now you're starting to see world, as you mentioned, through that windshield. Now you're seeing a bigger world versus just seeing it through this small little rear mirror type approach to life. So you age out of these behaviors. And like I said, for me, I committed my crime when I was 19, right? 19 years old. Some people committed 17, they served 20 and 30 years in prison. They come back in our communities and they push these individuals away. How do you reduce crime and recidivism in our communities? By educating these individuals, allowing them with what? Employment opportunities, housing opportunity, even higher education, college, because education transforms people. And what kind of society we're in when we say that a person who has a felony conviction can't even get a higher education? Like, certain people cannot even get a Pell a Pell Grant because they have a felony conviction. What kind of society we're in when we're talking about giving people second chance, and we know that education is key, and a person now want to get educated and you're telling them, no, you can't come to this particular college, you can't get this particular a federal assistance because you have a felony conviction. To me, I think that, these laws are now starting to be reappealed and addressed and changed, which is a good thing, because we have to understand that education is going to be the key to transform our community, not continue building prisons.
Amen.
And I have to admit, like even in the Bible, I'm going to have to go back to the Bible. And in order to be forgiven, we have to forgive. And people tend to forget that because, a lot of people have done a lot of things, but in order to be forgiven, you have to forgive and look past what people have done in the past. Because everybody's got a past, but it's really all about that windshield and what you're going to do and how you can make an impact in society. And you are making an impact in society right now, because I know that your mission right now is not just for yourself, it's for Gary, but it's also to make sure that other African Americans, Latinos, Hispanics, all ethnic groups are hearing your success story and making sure that you're going in there and saying, this was me, this could be you, and this is where it starts, all right here in the heart.
And can I ask, it's been on my heart since you were talking about this earlier, and I would be so sad if I didn't ask this question, but I think I know the answer, but I'm wondering, have you found peace with the loss of your mom and that incident, and peace with Gary? And how at what point in your life do you feel like that happened for you?
Tiff, great question. Yeah, it took me some years to really find peace with that. And again, in the most chaotic environment, God blessed me with a sense of peace with that. And that peace came when I began to acknowledge the harm. But most of them, if we acknowledge the harm, and to understand that as an adolescent, a teenager, I know my mom loved me, and I had to reassure myself that my mom did not left this earth upset with me. She left this earth with love and compassion for me, and I had to make peace with that. And how I made peace with it is crazy. In a chaotic environment, I had to make peace with that through letter writing. I had to literally write my mom letters after letters to help me cleanse that. Like in my book, The 5 Stages of Incarceration, one of the stages of incarceration that I mentioned is forgiveness, where I had to learn 4 ways of forgiveness. I had to learn forgiveness from God, forgiveness of those who have harmed me, forgiveness of seeking forgiveness for those who I harmed, most importantly, forgiving myself. And this is a real serious journey of forgiveness. People the word forgiveness roll off our tongue and it makes it easy. But when you're talking about standing in the mirror and forgiving yourself, and what I mean by that is, for me, I had to give comfort to the 16-year-old me. There's a lot of pain that the 16-year-old me was struggling with, and I had to forgive him. I had to release him from that, right? And even though here it is, I'm 20-something years old in prison, I had to go back to the 16-year-old me. And then I had to go to the 19-year-old me, the one who pulled the trigger. And I had to forgive me for that. But also I had to make amends with Gary, his spirit. And unfortunately, in the prison system, they don't allow you to have that relationship if there's a way that you and your victims can come together to have a conversation. So I knew that I had to literally release this power of forgiveness in the universe and asking God to bring about this type of reconciliation in some form or fashion, right? So by that, it gave me peace. But in last, I remember when I made parole, after serving the 22 years, God opened the door and I made parole. But I was always a little concerned about the family of Gary. Is his family still holding a level of resentment and bitterness and all of these things about me? And I actually went to this event. I was hosting an event, a youth event, and I was sharing with the youth in my community. Excuse me for a second, let me plug this. I was sharing a message with the youth in my community about the power of choices. And Gary's entire family reached out to me. This is powerful. Gary's entire family reached out to me, and I was a little hesitant to respond to it because I didn't know because I took their brother, right? and uncle, father, but they reached out to me with a spirit of forgiveness that I only prayed and dreamed about, and they poured into me. Like his sister heard me speak that day, and she walked up to me and she hugged me, and she said, Lester, on behalf of my family, we forgive you. And all we ask that you do is you continue to honor our brother and don't disappoint us by reverting back to the behavior. And I said, I made a promise to your brother many years ago. I would never sell drugs. I would never own a gun. I would never engage in that violent behavior ever again. And as time went along, I got a pardon here in South Carolina. And part of that pardon process, again, the parole board has to contact the victims, his family, Gary's family. And Gary's father, who recently passed away, he made a mention and said, I want to see him forgiven. I want to see him receive a pardon. Told his youngest son to make sure that you do everything you can. If I'm not here, the father, if I'm not here to see him get a pardon, I want you to do everything you can to make sure that Lester get a pardon, which is his youngest brother wrote on my behalf, called the parole board, the pardon board, and said, hey, our family believe that this man has done his time. We have forgiven him. We believe that he's doing great things. And that allowed me to continue the process level of peace and grace, and how grace can truly bring about redemption from people who, not from just people, but from God and all of the great things in creation. So I'm extremely at peace with all of those areas of my life now, because God has given me that sense of peace through forgiveness.
That's absolutely amazing. And I have to ask this question. Where do you see Road to Redemption going? Because I want to help you get on the stage with Ted. And I want to do everything we can, and because I want to make sure that this story is told. And I know that the road to redemption, and I've already started praying that when you're up there on stage on TED, giving that, telling your story, that Tiffany and I are going to be in the front row. I've already spoken into existence, and I've already started praying it for you, brother. And that is, but also, so I might not have spoiled it, but where do you see the road to redemption going, and what you're doing?
I really, long-term goal for Path to Redemption is to, one, put my curriculum, the 5 stages of incarceration, in various prisons across this country, right? To help individuals do that interpersonal work. Unfortunately, the prison doesn't really focus on the inner spirit of the person. So I want to really focus on that part of it. So when I think about redemption, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that's inside of a prison facility, bringing about true transformation in the lives of the men and the women inside of the prison. But also, when we look on the outside, helping individuals create this life of redemption after incarceration. And that means creating businesses for themselves, employing other individuals like them, being fathers and husbands and wives and sisters, being great citizens of our society, adding value, but also, most importantly, being an advocate for some of the policies that incarcerated them unjustly in some form or fashion, being an advocate to change some of the policies, because we know in our society, we got 2.3 million people in our country that are currently incarcerated. We have over 48,000 what is called collateral barriers that are attached to a person's felony conviction after their release, right? So even when a person is released, they're still denied the right to vote, denied housing, occupational licensing, education, SNAP benefit, all of these things that will allow you to have upper mobility. These things are denied depending upon the certain area they're in. So that's really what I wanted, to see people become advocates for themselves and transform the system by changing some of the hearts and the minds of the lawmakers who wrote these laws, not considering the voices and the impact, the long-term impact that these particular laws have on the lives of so many people in our country.
That's absolutely amazing. And so how can our followers follow you, the road to redemption?
They can follow me. Definitely go to Path to Redemption on Facebook with the number 2 in the middle. Or you can go to my Facebook page, Lester Young, and follow me there. On LinkedIn, Lester Young. On Instagram, Path to Redemption 515. Or you can just go to my my website, path2redemption.org, and you can find all my social media handles right there.
Well, that's awesome. And I hope people go and check you out. I also, I don't know how you go about it, but more getting out there and helping to advocate for all the things that you just talked about. I'm sure you have some pathways that you can recommend to us to be able to do that. But I would absolutely love to see. Actually, I'm going to continue to watch. I know Lance and I are both going to watch and see where you go from here, because as Gary's family said, I mean, honestly, you are out there doing things to make a difference. And I mean, honestly, I'm so thankful for what you're doing for the communities and for people so that they can have a better life and go on the up and up when it comes to things.
I appreciate you, Tiffany and Lance, for this opportunity. And like I said, as long as God bless breath in my body and give me the strength and the ability to continue to do this work, that's exactly what I would do. This is my legacy. But it's not just about my legacy, it's the legacy of Gary, because I want to uplift his name in spaces where, that he may have never had an opportunity to be even walk into, because I took his life over something as silly as drugs. But I want to continue to uplift him and honor his spirit in any capacity that I can. And this is not only my legacy, Path2Redemption legacy. This legacy is representing of Gary and his family, as well as my family as well. This is what it's all about, showing that we can transform lives inside of the prison as well as on the outside. So again, I thank you all for this opportunity.
Well, we thank you very much, Lester, for taking time and telling your story, telling Gary's story, and allowing our viewers. And we're going to do everything we can to get it out there. And you know what? Like I always say, keep making a difference in somebody's life today and every day. And you're absolutely doing it, brother. And whatever we can do to help you get there to down that road, we're going to do it and speak into existence. And God bless you. And thank you for joining us on Saturday Morning Coffee.
Cheers.